"You're not on the list, sir, and that patch on your coat looks like it was sewn by a child." The words weren't said with anger. They didn't need to be. They landed like a stamp, dismissal wrapped in protocol. The old man didn't flinch. He just stood there, hat in hand, jaw locked, the wind teasing the edges of a long, worn coat, and on his right shoulder, barely holding on by 2 stitches, was a patch. A name. Anna. Faded. Crooked. Sewn by someone who had known how to love, not how to march. He didn't argue. He didn't explain. He just took a step back from the gate and remained still. They shut him out of a state funeral that morning. But what no one inside knew was this. That man, the one they turned away, was the reason the general in that casket ever made it home at all. If you've ever watched the world walk past someone who should have been saluted, if you believe some names fade but should never disappear, type the word honor in the comments. And if you carry someone with you who was never officially thanked, subscribe. Because stories like this, we tell them so the silence doesn't win. The gate clicked closed again. Harold Beckett stood there like stone. His coat was clean, but dulled by time. The buttons were polished, but the thread was tired. The name on his chest had long since gone unnoticed, except maybe by him. He hadn't worn the uniform since the day Anna died. She was the one who stitched the patch, 3 weeks before the chemo took her strength, and 5 before it took her completely. "If you ever wear this again," she told him, "I want to be there too." So he kept it, just as she'd sewn it. Now, 34 years after Basra, he had come to keep the last promise that mattered. He wasn't invited. He didn't need to be. He had carried Jonathan Weller out of fire once, carried him through screams and smoke and into the arms of survival. And now, John lay beneath a flag, 50 yards beyond the iron fence, and Harold, who had once burned for him, stood in the cold, watching. He tried not to shift his weight. The leg, the one they gave him, was throbbing. The ache had settled into a familiar rhythm now, like a second heartbeat. But he refused to sit. He had not come to rest. He had come because no one should be buried alone. Inside, the color guard moved in silence. Brass glinted in the sun. A casket stood beneath the canopy, draped and dignified. The general's family was seated. Politicians lined the front row. Cameras were already clicking. Harold remained outside, unmoved, unacknowledged, until the laughter came. Not loud, not cruel, just young. A group of soldiers walking toward the gate spotted him. "Who's the statue?" one said with a grin. "Grandpa lost on his way to the museum," another added. The others chuckled. They weren't being mean. That made it worse. The tallest of them slowed. His gaze landed on Harold's patch. "Anna?" he asked aloud. "What's that? A souvenir?" He stepped forward, reached out, and gently tapped the cloth with 2 fingers. "Was she your wife?" Harold didn't answer, didn't blink. He raised his right hand, the only real one left, and covered the patch, slowly, firmly, like shielding something fragile from wind. The boy's hand fell away. His smirk died in his throat. He stepped back. A hush settled. The group moved on without another word. From a few feet away, a man had been watching, clipboard in hand. Lieutenant Daniel Reyes, mid-30s, quiet eyes. Something in the moment caught him. Not the gesture, but the stillness around it. Like that one act had stilled time. Reyes didn't know who Harold was, but something inside him whispered, "That man doesn't belong outside the fence." The ceremony continued on the other side of the gate, immaculate, rehearsed, solemn. Inside, words were being spoken into microphones. Ranks clicked heels in perfect sync. The cameras blinked quietly like watchful eyes, recording a version of history they were told to remember. But outside, Harold's silence deepened. It wasn't protest. It wasn't pride. It was the kind of silence that came from long familiarity with being overlooked. He shifted his weight, and pain surged up from the prosthetic. He clenched his jaw. The leg was chafing, raw at the socket. The walk from the bus stop had done more damage than he thought. Still, he didn't move. Then a voice crackled in someone's earpiece nearby. Unidentified civilian still present near South Perimeter, requesting clearance for removal, not responding to protocol, initiating next phase. Harold heard it. So did Reyes. The young lieutenant stiffened. He turned toward the radio operator, lips slightly parted as if to interrupt. But the operator had already relayed the message. Two security officers began making their way from the east entrance, eyes scanning the perimeter. Reyes glanced back at Harold. The old man was sitting now, slowly, deliberately. He'd lowered himself onto the edge of a low stone barrier near the path. He had taken off the prosthetic leg and was using a cloth to wipe the joint clean. Not with shame, but with the slow care of someone maintaining the last working part of a broken machine. It wasn't a dramatic gesture. There was no groan of pain, no dropped cane. Just the quiet dignity of a man tending to his wounds without asking anyone to care. And for some reason, Reyes cared. He stepped forward just as the two guards reached Harold. "Sir," one of them began, "you've been asked to leave. This is federal property. We're going to escort you." "He's not going anywhere," Reyes said. The guards turned. Their hands didn't drop, but their posture shifted. "Lieutenant, we have direct orders. You have protocol. I'm invoking discretion. If you remove this man before I speak to the general, you'll be the one writing the report." He wasn't shouting, but the air went still around him. Reyes looked back at Harold. The old man had finished cleaning the socket and was reattaching the leg. It was a slow, practiced motion, mechanical and human all at once. Reyes knelt beside him. "What's your name, sir?" Harold looked up, surprised. Not by the question, but by the tone. It wasn't official. It was personal. "Beckett," he said. "Sergeant Harold Beckett." Reyes blinked. Beckett. The name sat like a weight in his mind. He'd heard it before, in a briefing during basic, in a footnote on a slide deck titled Unsung Valor. The man with the steel arm who pulled two officers from a burning convoy under sniper fire in Basra. The man who disappeared from the military record weeks later. No medal ceremony, no retirement, no address. He stood. "I need to speak to General Avery, now." He didn't wait for permission. Inside the tent, Avery was reviewing his closing remarks when Reyes entered without knocking. "Sir, I apologize," he said, breath tight. "But there's someone outside. We've already closed the list. This isn't a list issue." Avery looked up. Reyes continued, voice lower now. "Sir, it's Harold Beckett." Everything in Avery's body went still. He reached for the folder he hadn't opened in years, the one that held the sealed black envelope with blocky handwriting on the front. For Harold, if he ever returns. Avery stood. "I need a moment," he said. Alone, Avery's boots whispered across the grass as he stepped out of the tent, the envelope held tightly in one gloved hand. He didn't walk with urgency, but with weight. Like something buried long ago had just surfaced, and he wasn't sure if he was ready to face it. Ahead, through the thinning crowd, Harold was standing again. The leg reattached, The coat adjusted. His hands rested on the top of his cane like he was holding a flagpole without a flag. Avery stopped a few paces away. The two men looked at each other for the first time in over 30 years. Neither saluted, neither smiled, just silence, recognizing, remembering. "I thought you were dead," Avery said at last. Harold blinked slowly. "For a while I was." Avery nodded, eyes lowered, then lifted the envelope. "She gave this to him," he said. "John gave it to Anna during the last rotation. Said if anything happened to him, she'd know when the time was right to pass it on." Harold's face didn't change, but his grip on the cane shifted slightly. "She never told me," he said. "Not bitter, just broken." "She didn't get the chance," Avery replied. "She passed a month after John came back. The letter was in a box of her things. John gave it back to me. Said to keep it until you came back. If you ever did." He handed it over. Harold took it with both hands, like it might fall apart from the years it had waited. The writing was still clear. To Harold, "If you're reading this, I didn't make it. But you did." The ink trailed off. Harold didn't open it. Not yet. Behind them, a hush began to ripple through the field. Someone had recognized him. Word was spreading. Avery nodded toward the canopy. "Come with me?" But Harold shook his head. "I wasn't invited." "You were asked," Avery said. "He just didn't get to say it." At that, Harold looked up, and for the first time, his eyes cracked. They walked together, not through the center aisle, not where the cameras waited, but along a quiet path through the side. Each step matched, each breath unspoken. And then something happened. A man in civilian clothes, sitting in the back row, stood. Another, 2 rows up, followed. Then a woman near the edge, silver hair tucked under a military beret, rose without looking at anyone. No commands were given, no music played, but they stood, because they knew what they were seeing, not spectacle, but truth. Harold didn't look to either side as he walked. He didn't need to. He could feel them, the slow, swelling tide of men and women rising to their feet. Some placed hands over their hearts. Others saluted with hands that shook from age or memory or both. One man near the end of the row stood using a cane, knuckles white with strain, knees trembling beneath the weight of the years. But he stood, because that's what you do when someone like Harold Beckett walks by. Among them, the group of young soldiers stood frozen. The same boys who'd once chuckled, who'd tapped a sacred name without understanding. Now their backs were straight, their mouths closed. One of them, the tallest, stepped forward just a little, enough to be noticed. "Sir," his voice cracked, "I'm sorry." Harold didn't stop, but he nodded. And in that nod, the boy saw something that felt like forgiveness. Not because it was easy, but because it had to be. They reached the platform. Avery motioned, and an officer in full dress stepped forward, carefully cradling the urn in his arms. He handed it to Harold without a word. Harold's hands were steady as he took it. For a moment, he stood still, the sun casting long lines across the marble, the silence complete. Then, with deliberate care, he climbed the steps. He moved slower than before, the weight in his arms not heavy, but enormous. At the top, he placed the urn beside the folded flag and removed his beret. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. He laid his hand over the urn and closed his eyes. No one interrupted. No one moved. Even the wind seemed to wait. When he stepped back down, the silence didn't break. It deepened. Avery met him at the bottom of the steps. They didn't speak, but their eyes said everything. Later, after the field had emptied and the honor guard stood down, a few figures lingered at the far edge of the cemetery, near the old oak tree. There, beneath its wide arms, a small bronze plaque had been set into the earth, in honor of Sergeant Harold Beckett and Anna. Because some names are never etched in stone, but carried in silence. Harold knelt, his knees cracked, his breath hitched, but his hand was steady as he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the patch. Anna, threadbare and soft from decades of memory. He dug a small hollow at the base of the tree and buried it. A gesture no one witnessed. No speech, no applause. But it said more than any anthem could. Avery stood behind him, hands clasped behind his back. Harold didn't look up when he spoke. "They'll come here someday," he said. Avery's voice was low, full. "They already are." Harold stood. The sun was low now, the light gentler. He adjusted his coat, but he didn't leave the field right away. He walked slowly toward a quiet bench beneath the old oak tree, the same one that bore their names in bronze now, and sat down. Not to rest, just to be. The roots of the oak were cool beneath his hand. Damp earth pressed into his palm as he slowly stood up again. The soil settled softly over the patch with Anna's name, like it had always been waiting for it. Harold didn't speak, but in the silence that followed, something had ended, or maybe begun again. The sun was dipping now, and long shadows stretched from the headstones like old regrets finally reaching their edge. Most people had gone. Just a few figures remained near the path, the ones who hadn't come because of protocol, but because they felt something tethered here. Reyes was one of them. He stood at a distance, watching the man he had once nearly helped remove from the grounds. His hands were clasped behind his back, but his mind was moving too fast to stay still. He approached only when Harold stepped away from the oak and turned toward the far bench. Not the one for ceremony, but one weathered by years, tucked under the branches. Harold sat with a slow exhale, the kind that doesn't just come from lungs, but from weight finally put down. Reyes hesitated, then sat beside him. For a moment, neither man spoke. "I read the letter," Harold said at last. His voice was low. "Last night." Reyes blinked. "From the general?" "No." Harold tapped his coat pocket. "From Anna." Reyes looked confused. "She wrote me one too, before the last surgery. She never gave it to me. I found it, years later. She knew I'd disappear after she went, knew I'd run from the world, said if I ever stood still long enough to remember who I was, I'd find her words." He paused. "I almost didn't." Reyes sat in silence. The only sound was the soft flutter of leaves above them, like someone whispering from a higher place. "She said," Harold continued, then stopped to steady his voice, "if you survive war but forget love, you haven't survived anything at all." Reyes swallowed. "I think maybe I didn't survive until today." He looked ahead, not at Harold, and said quietly, "I wish they had taught us this part." "What part?" "The part where the people we forget are the ones we should have been learning from." Harold gave a dry, tired smile. "You're learning now." A beat passed. "I deleted the photo," Reyes said. Harold turned to him. "The one I took earlier, of the canopy. The perfect shot. Polished. Empty." Harold's eyes softened. "That's good. But I kept another one." He tapped his phone, showed the screen. A photo of the oak tree. No names, no faces, just the dirt, freshly turned, and the roots disappearing into shadow. It felt true. Harold nodded once. It is. They sat like that for a while. 2 generations, one fading, one barely formed, meeting somewhere in the middle, not in command or confession, but in quiet understanding. As the sky began to turn gold, Reyes stood. Will you be back? Harold didn't answer right away. Then, not sure. Reyes nodded. He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a small pin, the kind worn on parade days, and held it out. I don't need to keep this, he said. Harold looked down at it. Infantry cross. No name, no rank, just the shape of duty. He didn't take it. Instead, he placed a hand gently over Reyes's shoulder. Wear it when you stand beside someone who didn't get their parade. Reyes's throat tightened. He tucked the pin away. As he turned to leave, Harold called after him, not loudly, but enough. Lieutenant? Reyes stopped. Thank you for seeing. Reyes nodded once, sharply. Then he walked away. Harold remained seated, his silhouette long and soft against the dying light. The wind tugged gently at the coat again, lifting the edge, but the shoulder was bare now. No patch. Just the memory of a name once stitched with love. From a distance, someone took a photo. Not for social media, not for news, just for themselves. Because some moments aren't shared. They're carried. Harold adjusted his coat and walked back the way he came. And this time, as he passed, people stood. Because some uniforms fade, but some men never do. He didn't leave right away. He walked slowly to the bench beneath the oak tree, where the roots whispered things he no longer had to say out loud. Where Anna's name now rested not on his shoulder, but beneath the earth, beside his own. He sat just for a moment, not to be seen, not even to reflect, just to be. From a distance, someone took a photo. No flash, no caption, no share, just for themselves. Because some moments aren't shared. They're carried. That was the end of the service, but it wasn't the end of the story. Not for the lieutenant who watched the old man vanish down the gravel path with nothing but a letter in his coat. Not for the young soldier who had once touched a sacred patch with careless fingers and now stood at attention, wondering what else he'd never been taught to see. Not for the woman with silver hair and a 1,000-yard stare, who whispered something only the wind could hear when Harold walked by. If you carry someone with you, someone whose name was never carved in marble but is etched somewhere deeper, say it in the comments. One word, one name. That's enough. And if this story stayed with you, subscribe. Because remembrance isn't an act. It's a way of walking forward, together.